Cool. So, welcome everybody. Today we will learn how modern browser APIs can enhance our web projects and help us to think and design features in a new way. As we will see, these APIs have the goal to close the feature gap with native apps, allowing us to deliver not only a richer experience to our users, but also to help us to think and design new features in a completely new way. Features that so far were possible only through native apps. During this session, I will show a lot of demos, and of course, we also describe the code behind each of the APIs we will see. So I will, as I said, I will focus more on the live examples, not only to keep the talk more engaging and entertaining, but also because, as you will see at the end, I left many comments in code itself. Therefore, it's very easy to follow along. At the end of the talk, I will give you the link to the GitHub repo so that you can not only play with the live demo, but also see and download the code, the source code at your side. I won't look at the chat live during my talk because I typically prefer leave all the questions at the end. So feel free to write them in the chat during my session so that at the end I will read them and I will answer one by one. Otherwise, if new questions pop up, you can always reach me on Twitter. I will leave at the end of the session also my Twitter handle so that you can reach me there. Let's say now, if you look at the picture and you wonder whether we can launch a space rocket with our browser, well, not completely yet. Or at least I will not try it with Safari. But let's say JavaScript went to the space. The image you can see is the Dragon 2 console that uses Chromium, JavaScript, and C++ for the touch commands. The Dragon is the first spacecraft with touch screens. Indeed, it's a very different console or dashboard than the typical image of the space shuttle, or at least I have in mind, with 1,000 of mechanical buttons. It's quite a huge evolution in that sense. The interface makes extensive use of web components and a custom reactive framework. Even if, of course, as you can see in the middle, there are still some hardware buttons for the critical operations, and this is a good thing. However, even if we don't plan to go to the space with our web project, still we can benefit from these modern web APIs that we are going to see shortly in our project. However, before proceeding further, let me introduce myself. My name is Francesco Leardini, and I work as a senior consultant and Angular trainer at Trivadis, an IT consultancy company covering a wide set of technologies with headquarters in Switzerland. Even though I work as a full-stack engineer, and therefore having .NET and C# as my backend side, I'm very, very interested in the web technologies, specifically progressive web apps, Angular, and of course, modern web in general. That said, let's start without any further ado, let's start our APIs journey now. The first API we will see is called page visibility. It's outside, so it's available already since many years, therefore is widely supported by many browsers. This API allows us to intercept events that we can listen to in order to know when the page document, is changing its visibility, therefore is hidden or is currently visible. There are other ways we can detect whether the browser window loses focus or get focus again. But this is not a very, let's say, precise way to detect whether the user has really the page or the document visible. Concrete scenarios or application of these APIs are, for example, a carousel on a sales or a marketing website, or simply in our website, where we go from one product to the next and we rotate every product on sale, for example. If we want to really be sure that the user checks and sees all these products, we can stop this carousel from rotating to the next product when, for example, he or she opened a new page or minimized the current page. Another Usage could be, for example, a client application that is constantly or regularly pulling data from the server, so that we can let this polling function be active or be triggered only when the page is currently visible, in order to optimize the bandwidth, so that the client will get fresh data, but only when the page is visible and not in the background, for example. This is particularly important for mobile users. Let's see now our demo. This is a web page, or the whole application has been done just by convenience in Angular and Angular material. But all the APIs we will see today, we will describe today, are completely independent from any kind of framework. Could be React, Vue, Angular, as I said, or even vanilla JavaScript. They will all work the same way. And later on, I will give you the link for this. So as I said, the Page Visibility API is the first demo we'll see, the first example. Every of these APIs that we will describe later on will have the same structure, with a short description at the top, the core or the main body of the example, and then at the end, and this is important, the browser compatibility. So the version and the different browser that support or don't support this current API. This is very important, especially for the more experimental APIs we will see later on. So as I said, we can see here that page visibility is widely supported by almost every browser. For this example, we play a video. And then when we open a new tab and we go to a new tab, we want to stop the video because we don't want that the user misses even a frame of it. So let's start the video. We can see the seconds go on. And in the tab, I changed the title to play just for the sake of the demo. Now I open a new tab, and we can see here pause, because the API understood that now that page, that document, is not visible anymore. Therefore, it pauses the video. Now, when I go back, we can detect that now the document is visible again, and then here we will see play, and the video will play exactly from the second we left it. Let's see. Exactly. So we can see here in the simple example of a video, but to give you the idea of how we can use this information to apply some logic to our context according to what are our needs. Let's see now the code. Here, simply, the template part, the DOM part, is not very interesting. There is just a video element that has two different URLs. The important part is in the component side. Again, don't focus on the Angular part, but more on the API method that are completely independent from Angular. Here, I simply get a reference to the video element that we see here in the template. So is this a template variable? And then I can listen to the visibility change event on the document. When this event is triggered, I can check if the hidden variable of the document object is true or false, meaning that it's hidden or is visible. And according to that, I invoke the pause or play element respectively on this native element. That's it. Very simple, but still it can give us a lot of possibilities to improve some logic or some functionality on our client side. And here, the lower part is just an enhancement of the demo, just to see concretely the title of the page, that pause or play according to when the page is visible or not. But the core takeaway from this API is that we can listen to this visibility change event, and then according to that, we can get the information whether the document is hidden or not. And then we can apply the logic we want. So it's let's say, not the latest or most modern API, but still it's very powerful. The next API is probably one of my, or the second of my favorite APIs. This is a very powerful API because, especially for mobile devices to save battery, they go on sleep mode when left idle. For example, my phone, after 15 seconds, go in standby. However, thanks to the screen wake lock API, we can prevent the mobile device from dimming and locking the screen. We can think about practical usage of this API for a presentation web application that keeps always the screen active while displaying the content. So the user doesn't have to interact with the screen all the time to keep it active. Or, and I think this is absolutely a killer feature or a killer API for these specific applications, is a cooking web API that keeps the screen active while we follow a recipe steps. Think about as I find myself in many cases. I'm Italian, I really like to cook, and many times I follow on my phone a recipe and I find myself in this situation. So hands completely dirty with the caramel, chocolate, or dough. And then your phone goes on standby, and now with the hands you should go and unlock it. Not very practical. But thanks to this API, we can avoid this. For this, I will, of course, use my phone and I will mirror it. So we can have the two versions of my phone. On the right side is mirrored, and I have the same application installed on my phone. Now I leave it and I go on the desktop version to describing it on. So the wake lock sentinel needs is an object that gets invoked by the user. We have, you can see now it went on standby. Now, always on my phone, I explicitly request the wake lock sentinel, and I leave it. I don't touch it anymore, and I go on simply on the desktop part to describe it. So in order to allow this API to work, we have not only to use a secure connection, but also it has to be triggered, this screen lock, after or through a user gesture. So the user has to trigger or initialize this request. We cannot do automatically or programmatically without a user interaction. Once this is done, we get this lock, and then the screen is kept active all the time. Then the lock is automatically released if we leave the page. But we can eventually also create some logic that if the user initially granted the permission to acquire the lock and then comes back, we can automatically re-get the lock, so that for the user, going from this page to the next is completely transparent as soon as he or she granted the first time the wake lock permission, or let's say invoked through a gesture the permission. As you can see, now I talked quite a lot, and my mobile didn't go dim, didn't go standby. It's still then active. It's a very nice thing because now you can scroll down. I never tried this recipe, so I don't know if it's good or not, but I chose this because for the demo was perfect. It's a very long, so it can give a very good feeling. How could it be? Following this recipe and having or enjoying the benefit of this API. But let's see now the code, how we can implement it. First thing, when we always work with these browser APIs, it's good to check whether the different APIs are supported. And if not, then either we provide a feedback to the user, or simply we transparently don't provide this functionality. In here, we use also the API that we saw before, so the visibility API, and we will see later why we use this. But first of all, as we said, we have to use a user interaction or a user gesture in order to allow or be allowed to request the wake lock. In this case, is a lock enable change is simply an event that is triggered when we click on the checkbox. So we toggle the value and we invoke this method in order to request or release the lock according to the value. Request wake lock is another method, and here this is the real core thing. So on the navigator object, we use or we invoke the request method on the wake lock object. In this case, we pass screen as a parameter that is currently the only active parameter we can use. Before it was also system, but nowadays this has been removed, is not valid or accepted anymore. Once we have this lock sentinel, we can then keep all the time the screen active and locked until we can listen to a release, and then we can show on the UI, for example, that a message that if it's important that the sentinel has been released. Otherwise, simply ignore that. When we destroy our object, or we want to release this lock sentinel, we can then invoke the release method, and this simply release the lock sentinel. As we saw before, if we navigate somewhere else or we minimize the page, automatically the lock sentinel is released. But we can leverage this functionality and listen to the visibility change event we saw before, so that if the wake lock sentinel has been requested and the page gets visible again, then we can automatically request a wake lock, so that for the user it will be transparent that the wake lock, once go back, will stay active and won't be released, as otherwise it would be as default. So it's an interesting API that can unlock a lot of different scenarios and usage or applications. Another very interesting API, very experimental still, is the ambient light sensor interface that is part of the sensor APIs collection. Sensor APIs allow us to use the device hardware devices, could be gyroscope, or as in this case is the light sensor. Of course, the device that we are going to target or use have to be enhanced, or have to have the capabilities of reading the light availability of the light amount around the area. So we can use this in order to detect the luminance or the amount of light around the device. Think about how, for example, Google Maps allow us to automatically go in a dark mode when we are traveling with our car, for example, and we are crossing a tunnel. In that case, automatically switches to the dark mode, or if we use it at night. So far, we always have to switch to the dark mode manually. But thanks to this API, for example, you can see that it's still on, the wake lock, for example. Thanks to this API, we can detect the light amount and automatically switch, for example, to the dark mode, so that our users read some blog of our application, some information during the day. And as in this case, for the demo purpose, I've made so that the website, the web interface is bright or white. Now I go closer to a window or a source of light, yeah, and we can see that the light level increase. If I go away from it till a certain threshold, we can see, now I cover it maybe, yeah, we can see that the light level is within a certain level, a certain threshold, and automatically switches to the dark mode. Of course, it's a very simple example, but still very powerful, because give us an idea of what we can achieve with this API. Still is an experimental, this API. Therefore, we have to keep in mind that we have to enable some, on the client side, some flex on Chrome, because Chrome is so far the one of the few browsers that supports it. And even though it's supported, we still need to enable among the flex some flex value in order to make it possible to use it. But nevertheless, we can use it in order to enhance or leverage these so-called progressive enhancements. So provide for some users that use modern browsers some extra functionalities, and for the others simply transparently don't provide these functionalities. So once again, we have to check if the API is allowed, is supported or not. And if so, we can, on the window object, we can create an instance of the ambient light sensor interface or object. And this gives us the sensor object that needs to be granted or needs to have granted from the user some permissions. If they are not granted the first time, we can recheck after they have been granted. If denied, of course, nothing will be done. Otherwise, we can start reading the ambient light again. So we go here again, and we start now reading the light values using the start or invoking the start method. Once we invoke the start method, we can then live or constantly listen on reading evaluation or reading values on the device. And then according or with these values, is called illuminance values, we can do whatever we want. In this case, we use a callback update theme where we pass indeed this illuminance value that is registered from our phone. And then here, for example, I define the 50 value as a threshold to discriminate whether the ambience is dark or well illuminated. And therefore, automatically switch the ambient value, so dark and bright, and with that, with the CSS, then switch to the dark mode or bright mode. A very simple example, a very simple demo, so can give us a feeling of what we can achieve with these modern APIs. File System Access API is another very, very cool functionality and feature that we can add to our web applications, allowing us to easily manipulate files locally and provide a much better user experience, exactly like using a native app. Because so far, if we wanted to change a local file, we had to first, from a website, we have to download it to a new location or eventually override, after we edit it in a text area, for example, we override an existing file. So not very convenient or not always so user-friendly. The File System Access API, so, offers two methods that allow us to trigger a so-called file picker dialog to open or to save a file. These two methods give us, as a returned object, a file handle object that give us information about the file and also allow us to create a connection to the locally saved file. This is very convenient because all the following saves can go straight to that file without having us to download or overwrite the file again and again. One important thing to keep in mind, though, is that we have to grant read or write permissions every time we access the page because there is no permissions persistence. So every time the user refreshes the page or comes back again to the same page, have to grant again these read or write permissions. But let's see how does it work. This API works only on desktop machines, we can see here. For the mobile, not yet. And we have again to provide some flags. Here we can see that we can open a file, a text file, for example. Here I already prepared one with some text. We can see after we did that, let's zoom a bit. Here we have a new icon now, where we can see that this page is allowed to view file. This means that implicitly now by opening, so with a user interaction, opening these files, we grant read permissions. Now I edit it and I save it. And now the page or the API asks us, do you want to grant also write permissions? And you say yes. And if we look at the icon again, this has changed now. Now we have not only to view, but also to edit the file. It's a very nice. Now, if I refresh the page, we can see that here the icon disappeared. So we have to grant eventually these permissions again if we want to save the page. But if we open the file that we just changed it, we could see that our changes were here. So again, I can put all the content, save, yes, the first time, but then all the other changes are done automatically for us. So all the new code go straight. We don't have to every time download the page and so on and so on. So we can even create an automatic saving functionality. So very convenient and very powerful in order to provide through this web feature, this web API, kind of a native feeling or native feature. Let's see the code. In here, when we open the file, let's start with this method. So we click on the button to open the file. We get the file handle by invoking the local getFileHandle method. As I said before, we can invoke the show open file picker. This is to open the file picker dialog. And what comes back from this, that is a promise, what comes back is the file handle. That is a good practice to keep locally available, because when we want then to save the changes we did, we can check if this file handle is available. And if so, we can straight save the file, creating a stream, and to the file itself. I won't go this in detail because it is exactly the normal file stream, so it's nothing new. Same thing when we wanted to save as, so this would directly create a completely new file. In this case, also we grant implicitly write permissions, so that if we are going to create a completely new file, we don't have every time to grant write permissions, because these are given or granted implicitly by a user gesture. Among other things, when we open a save file picker or an open file picker, we can provide which is the extension we want to filter by, or eventually which is the string we want to provide in the description in the file picker. So very nice functionality that we can provide through our web application to give a bit more of a native touch. Web share. Nowadays that all our user or everybody is very used to many social media apps, so Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and so on, it's very convenient to have a way to share some content from our website or web application through these native apps. And this can be done through the Web Share API. It allows to share an object that has a text body, a string, content, a title, and the URL. These three properties are not all mandatory. Just one has to be provided, must be defined. However, it's always a good practice to provide them all, because we don't know which application the user will use. For example, if he or she will share a specific information through WhatsApp, for example, then the text property is enough to share some text content. However, if the user, instead of using WhatsApp, uses an email, then even the title might be relevant, because this will be automatically added as an email subject. Therefore, it's always good to use all these three properties. And let's see now live how we can do that. It's very interesting that recently also the browser, or at least in the Chrome version, we can have this. Even in the desktop version, we have this available. So if I click on this on the desktop version, still the browser is capable of proposing some local applications, so that we can use to share this information. Here, for the demo purposes, I have two of my favorite cocktails. And let's imagine is a bar or a cocktail web application, and we can give the opportunity to share these cocktails recipes in a very convenient way through other social media apps. So before, as I said, it was available only on the mobile version, but nowadays also on the desktop, at least for Chrome. So if I click on the share icon, we invoke the share method, and here we can see we have different native app application we can use to share this information. So I use WhatsApp, I select a contact, and then I simply send it. And we can see that we have a title here, Manhattan, for example. We have the text part, in this case is the ingredients and the preparation. Plus we can provide, of course, optionally, another URL that we can use it and invoke it. So very easy and very powerful, so to provide much more engagement through our web application. And the benefit also, or the nice thing of this API is that it's extremely easy to use it. The only thing we have to do is invoke the share method over the navigator object. So we pass then the target. In this case, the target is the collection of the objects that we want to share. In this case, I clicked on the Manhattan right part, therefore this is the target in this case. And the share object, as you can see, has three properties, URL, text, and title. And with a level 2, so a newer version of this API, we can even provide files as images, for example, or media-rich content, if it's the case for our scenario. But that's it. We don't need anything else. And the browser will do everything else for us. So proposing a dialogue with some native apps and allow the user to choose any of them to share the content. Content Picker is another cool API because allows to use or to access device contact list within the context of our web application. This so far was a functionality that was absolutely precluded to web and possible only through native apps. This API allows to select some contacts from the device list and use them indeed within our web application. We can choose or extract properties like the name of the contact, the email, phone number, street address, and icon, of course, if any of these are available. And then we can use them within our application, showing maybe some contact details. As you might have guessed, this works only on mobile devices, so far at least. Therefore, also to show that we can progressively enhance this application, we can see that on the desktop version, the button is disabled, so that we don't provide this application, this functionality here. Now on the phone part, if I click on the select contacts, I can see that I have all my contacts here from the contacts. And then if I choose one, I can see here that this was, of course, a test contact. I have a title, an icon, and even the street. So this is a very, very futuristic, or let's say a very cool functionality, because we can interact once again and once more with the hardware device or with the phone itself and make the contact list available through the web application. It's very convenient when we have, for example, to send messages somewhere, or we need to get the email from this or the other contact, or some information that we want to share. So let's see the file, the contact picker example. In here, we invoke, when we click the button, the select contacts. We can define which properties will be available or selectable by the user, and the user always has the possibility to even remove some of them if he doesn't want to allow all of them, even though by default all the properties that are available are here. Once then the user selects or clicks one of these contacts, these will be available here, and so back, and then we can use these contacts object in the UI, for example, by putting some of these information. So extracting the address, the city, we always have to be careful because some of this information might be missing. So another very interesting and very cool functionality that we can add to our web applications. Vibration API is the last API we will see today. He's allow us, of course, if the device allows to create some pattern of vibration. So accepting an array of integers and then tells whether it has to vibrate for X millisecond, pause, X millisecond, and then again interchanging a vibration and then a silence pattern, so that we can create any pattern we want. And also it's very simple because we just have to invoke the vibrate method over the navigator object. Here, I want spoiler is a quiz that you can follow along with your mobile device, of course, so that you can get 3 short vibrations if you give a right answer, or a long one if the answer is wrong. Let's see now the code. And for the vibration, and as I said, is a very simple. We define the different patterns for correct and wrong answers. So again, vibrate, silence in milliseconds, and so on. So we create any logic we want, and then we invoke the vibrate pattern over the navigator object by passing the specific pattern. And that's all what we need in order to create this vibration pattern, so silence or not. So this API could be good in game web applications, for example. There are explosions and we can let the device vibrate, or give tactile feedback if the users, for example, makes any errors while filling a form. So this API concludes this session. Here you can see the link to the GitHub repos where you can find the live demos as well as the source code. Also some of my social media links, so that feel free to follow me if you are interested in web topics in general. And where I post also some, from time to time, some topics or some new articles about modern web. That said, I thank you very much for the attention, for the interest. I hope it was interesting for you. And I say, if we have still 1 or 2 minutes, if you are some...
Yeah. I'm looking at the chat and the Q&A section. Yeah. I don't see any questions yet.
Okay, that's perfect. Anyway, if any other questions in the future pop up, feel free to reach me on Twitter and make your questions there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Otherwise, thank you very much, and have a nice day and a good continuation for the conference.
You too.
Thank you very much.
You too.